All right, we're live. We're back. We're back. We're in our gear. You're rocking Panthers culture. He's a great follow. I'd love to see what that guy has to say. Is he ever happy? Is he ever happy? I don't know. All right. I just went live for 20 minutes when this happened. This set up the scene. I was supposed to go to work, and I get a call. Well, I was asking my friend who's a Tennessee Titans fan, Edgar Salpico, at Panthers analyst. My brother from another mother from the left coast. Hey, Dave Canales could be your brother from another mother. We'll find out. And then we don't know. And so I asked my friend who's a Tennessee Titans fan, like, oh, friggin' Vrabel's coming in for an interview. What do you think? And he was going to tell me, I think you just hired Dave Canales. I was like, huh? Like, wasn't that guy cool, like, at like 11 a.m. yesterday, Eastern Standard Time? He's not cool now. It's Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel's cool. Busting with the boys. Come on. And then I look, and I was like, oh, my goodness. And I literally ran into my studio and sat on the ground because I didn't have time. I'm still standing. And I just put on this because I was wearing a workout shirt because I was working out in my living room. I was like ready to go to work. And then work's like, oh, you don't have to be until 3. I was like, all right, so let's do another one.
Let's do it.
So, okay, people heard me talk for 20 minutes. Edgar, you're a California guy. I didn't realize. I just read your tweet now. Are you going to cry?
Am I going to cry? No,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
It's getting misty in here. No, I'm just kidding.
No. Huh?
It's getting a little dusty in here. No, I'm just
the California sand, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody is kind of. I think what Panther fans don't want to hear is this. It's kind of like a love-hate hire, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think where I place it's kind of the middle ground.
Yeah.
For me personally, like Dave Canales, I've been impressed by his offense, impressed by his leadership, his approach to teaching his players. Looks like he would be a culture-changing kind of guy that holds people accountable. Experience with Dan Morgan, Greg Olson kind of gave him a mini approval when when they played last week. And so, like, I feel like he's a good coach, but was he the best option with considering what else was out there? So, in a vacuum, you say, hey, I got this. This is awesome. I'm happy with it. He's like, oh, but look at what you could have had. You could have had some of the best offensive minds in the NFL right now. You could have had some of the, contending coach of the year type, previous coach of the year type people like Bill Belichick or Mike Vrabel. And so I'm firmly planted in the middle. Like, I'm super excited, but like, I'm just a little bit like subdued because, they're who knows how this is going to work out? Nobody will know. And we're just gonna have to be patient and see how it ends up.
Yeah. Like I was saying, like, I'm kind of like, I'm excited that it's done. There you go. You got some nice lighting there.
There you go.
Now we see your face. And so, like, it's not a Jim Harbaugh or a Bill Belichick was like, all right, you got this name. That's going to come with titles. You need titles now. Like, if you don't, after 5 years, it's a failure. And you don't have a Ben Johnson who's got crazy hype right now. I've also never heard him speak. I think I've heard him speak once. And and so you got a guy and you don't have a Matt Rule who guy was successful in college. And he was coming to the NFL. But, like, you're getting a guy who's like an unknown commodity. He kind of came up late this year. And, like, I think to a lot of people, maybe it was their tier 2, tier 3 guy. Yep. And so it was almost just like, all right, what is going on right now? And yeah, like you said, it's like in a vacuum, it seems cool. It's like, okay, we got a guy, offensive guy, young guy. But yeah, like when you mentioned, like, the Chargers just announced Jim Harbaugh yesterday, and Bill Belichick's out there. Mike Vrabel's still out there. Ben Johnson looks like he's destined to be in DC. Bobby Slowick, I think, is going to go back to Houston. I think he has unfinished business. I think he's like Ben Johnson last year. We also don't know what Ben Johnson's going to do. He could be a wild card. He could be like, hey, if they lose in the NFC NFC Championship game, he could be like, we were so close. I'm coming back. Pull the Leonardo DiCaprio and Wolf of Wall Street. I'm coming back. Like, I can see that. I can totally see that. And if Dan Morgan holds the door shut, you're not getting out. You can't get out. But my thought is Dave Canales Ben Johnson before Ben Johnson was Ben Johnson? You know what I mean? Like, before he was this, like, highly coveted human being. Is that who Dave Canales is?
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted a cautionary tale because there was this, there's this little buzz about, like, hey, maybe, like you just said, like, maybe Dave Canales is Ben Johnson before, like, what if we were a year early? What if we were getting him? But there's so many offensive coordinators who had that buzz, quote unquote, a year early and kind of flamed out.
Yeah.
Joe Brady, he had tons of head coaching
Mm-hmm.
interviews, and then he didn't end up getting head coach, and then he kind of like petered out. Baron Leftwich was a hot name for the Jacksonville
Right. Where
Jaguars
is he?
head coach. Yeah, now he's not even coaching.
Yeah.
But there's more of those names of hot, young offensive coordinator types, and then the second year they kind of peter out, or they're not as hot. Ben Johnson has been hot and stayed hot, and so like I think I don't know if we could just easily say like, hey, you're young, you have a good offense, year one, like you'll be the next Ben Johnson. Like I would just throw some caution, because again, Joe Brady was the hot name. In year two, he got fired, and so anything can happen. And hope is that doesn't happen, but I wouldn't automatically correlate Ben Johnson and Dave Canales.
No, that's
and Dave Canales' peak has never been as high as Ben Johnson.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why it's just kind of like, okay, and that's why that's where the subduedness comes in for me. Like, I'm sure Dan Morgan was told the season's done. Hey, this is your job, and so it feels like we also don't know where he got interviewed. If he took any at all, and then we also understand that Canales only interviewed with the Panthers. It's like, geez. Like what? Either Sportsology has like some like crazy time machine that they know this guy's gonna be something special. They read something about him, like okay, they read something about how he is as a person, how he's wired. They get this guy now. That we're the only ones that interviewing this guy. Why? Like what's and so that freaks me out a little bit. Unless the Panthers are either complete idiots and we've been scammed from Sportsology or whoever, or we're geniuses and we got this guy before it gets too out of control, and then the Cowboys fire their head coach and we're now suddenly bartering with Jerry Jones and company. That's the thing that freaks me out. We got a general manager who we don't know where else he got hired, and then we got a coach that hasn't interviewed anywhere else.
I think us as Panthers fans are programmed to expect the worst.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like, is the option that we're geniuses, we know more than anybody else, or we're like dummies? We're going to be programmed to think we're probably not the smartest in the world.
Probably not. But then like we got this company that's Sportsology. Like, hey, they picked up a guy from TV and John Lynch, and then they picked up Kyle Shanahan, who just lost Super Bowl after leading 24-3. I was like, what are you doing? Like, I remember when that happened. It's like, wait, you're getting this media guy who doesn't know anything, and you're bringing him on, and then you're going to get this guy who just got lost in a historic fashion in the Super Bowl. But I don't know. I just think,
And I think that's where my shred of hope comes from. Like, if this was just David Tepper saying, I picked Dan Morgan, I just picked my best buddy. It's like, okay, this is like, this is just the same old show, just a different channel, right? But with a third party involved, with a highly reputable firm involved, again, we'll never know like what they recommended, the extent of which they've been giving their recommendations. Do they do completely opposite? Do they say, I'm just going to do our own thing? But that's the only shred of hope that I'm clinging on to, is that somebody from the outside is helping tell them like, hey, this is what you should do, or this is what we recommend. And so I'm coming into this process again, even though we're in the middle, like I'm leaning optimistically, because there's somebody out there that's looking at the Panthers organization from an outside lens and saying like, hey, this is how you can improve your processes. This is how you can maximize the efficiency and productivity. This is how you can rearrange, maybe, one thing that we hadn't talked about is Dan Morgan's new title, president of football operations. Does that mean he is the head honcho of football and nobody else? Is it like, is Tepper going to meet with the head coach? Is Tepper going to like be in these meetings? Like, is this completely a wall between the football operations and Dave Tepper? Is Dan Morgan going to be that wall? And so that's why there's little things that give me hope, give me optimism. Before, if there was no Sportsology, then I was like, okay, this is just going to fail like every other Tepper decision that's happened before.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that having that arbitrator on the outside, just kind of looking at this, and I just I'd love to see how they do this stuff. And, do they find certain qualities or a score? Like, I've been in meetings before when we try to hire people and they have certain scores for certain answers and stuff like that. I would love to see what this Mike Vrabel interview was like. Like, what time was it at? Was it like 8 in the morning? Was he hungover? Did he go out? Like, was he in a private jet and drinking all the free booze? And then he came in there like, oh my God. Like, do you think, like, him and Morgan are two defensive guys? I think he looked at him and like, you need a break. I think you tweeted that, like, I think you need a break. You need a year off, busting with the boys for a year or something like that. Go on CBS or Fox and then come back. That must have been a really quick meeting. Like, it felt quick.
Yeah, I mean Mike Vrabel, the coach, he's like really impressive. He's such a good coach, but
Mhm.
I tweeted like he's only of the last 24 games, he's only won 6. He's only won 25% of his last game. So like
Yeah.
if someone needs a break, if someone needs to go busting with the boys, if
Yeah.
someone and on top of that, one thing I also tweeted is that he's getting paid right now, right? Like
Yeah.
he got fired. So he's getting a paycheck no matter what. So if he's coaching, like he
Mhm.
doesn't get double the salary, like that Tennessee paycheck kind of disappears and he gets the
Mhm.
Carolina paycheck. And so I could imagine maybe some quick conversation saying like, "Hey, is this where you're at? What do you want to do?" And then like
Yeah.
maybe when they laid out the land, maybe Vrabel's like, "Hey, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for bringing me in, but like maybe this isn't the best place for me to jump into after what I've just
Right.
experienced. Maybe I need to take a year off. Maybe I need either that or find a spot where I'm instantly going to like
Right.
have winning. But to go
Yeah.
from a losing, yeah, he only won 6 of the last 24 games, and then go into Carolina, which no one's going to expect them to start the season on fire.
Yeah.
It's probably not best for his own personal sake. Happy
Mhm.
for us, but probably not good for his his personal trajectory as a
Yeah.
coach.
Yeah. He might be that team that's like one coach away. Like,
Yep.
he doesn't need to
Yep.
do all that because there's a lot of work to do. We know that. And
Yep. Yep.
with Canals, let's talk about the personal stuff. Like, so he's from your neighborhood. Do you know the Canaleses? Can you go to their house?
I know where his brother's church is. It's in Carson, but it's
Easy.
not
Go.
too far from here.
Yeah.
This is like at the very beginning when they talked about bringing him in. I just
Mm.
looked at his Wikipedia page. You know, he was born in Harbor City. I live in Harbor, or my parents still live in Harbor City.
Mm.
Carson is the next city over, so that's where I went to the library. That's where I got my haircuts. Like this is
Oh.
just the next city over.
Mm.
But he made his name. I don't know him personally, but he made his name because he went. The one thing that I think people will appreciate is like he started from like the ground up. So he's not
Mm.
like my dad is in the NFL, so like not no slight to Bobby Slowick or any
Right.
of these or Callahan, right? It's like
Oh, fun you,
I'm
Slowick. You're a bum.
yeah,
You're a
like
bum. But
he
yeah.
literally started coaching football at a community college, right, with the
Wow.
people that aren't making Division 1 scholarships, right? And so
Mm.
he was so impressive. Pete Carroll brought him on to USC, and then when Pete Carroll went to Seattle, he was so impressive. He's like, "Hey, come with me to Seattle," right? And so there's a lot of easy things to like about him. I think no one's going to look at his story or his videos or his press conferences or just who he is as a person and be like, "Man, this guy's a terrible person," or "This guy's not going to work out." I think everyone's going to root for him. I think the most important thing, I think I tweeted about it, I think you're thinking about it, I think all of us are thinking about it, is like he is not going to succeed with this roster. Like
Yeah.
that is the number one priority. I could put Bill Belichick, I could put Jim Harbaugh in here, but if they don't improve this roster, they're still going to be the same losing franchise of experience for the last 6 years.
Yeah, like, I mean, like, yeah, I said that in the stream that look at what he had in Seattle. When he did revive Geno Smith's career, get him a big contract, get DK Metcalf, and he had Tyler Lockett, and then in Tampa they got what they got, like Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and they got Rashid White. They got all these guys. So yeah, they got to do some work still. And at least now we have the capital A alignment now with him and Dan Morgan. They love each other. They're Seattle guys. It'd be so cool if they brought in Pete Carroll as a consultant. It will never happen. It'll never happen. Because everyone compared him to a Pete Carroll, like with his positivity, just sounded like that. And
Yeah.
And he's a guy I think is going to age like fine wine. They wanted to be in the league for the team for 20 years, right? And so
Yep.
he's only 40. He's 42. He's old. He's a lot older than me. So that's good. I hated that. I've been saying he's 37 because he looks like a 37-year-old. He looks great. All that Tampa vitamin D. It's awesome.
I don't know how much he could squat though, Phil.
Oh, he can squat. I can see it. I can see him. Or he could be one of those guys like, oh, I don't squat anymore. I just walk backwards. I can see him doing that for sure. But they also mentioned, that he says he's from Carson, but he is like the fourth Hispanic NFL head coach, I believe. Ron Rivera, obviously with the Panthers. Last time we hired a Hispanic coach, Super Bowl. I don't know. That Charlotte FC, like time with that community that was untapped. Bring it back. Is he bilingual? Do we know that?
That I don't know.
Yeah,
I would assume so, but I don't know.
That'd be great. Let's see what Tony Zhang's saying. Got another Asian in the house. I like the Dave Canales side. This shows that Tepper is slowly stepping away from football. We don't know that. I mean, what's it called? He's still got his young offensive-minded head coach.
Yeah, I tweeted, and this is just pure speculation and gossip, but I was thinking, hey, here's a guy who. Sorry, that's my printer randomly calibrating.
I thought you had like someone cleaning your house. I was like, whoa, what's going
just
on?
my printer. I was randomly speculating that hey, like maybe Dave Canales is a good middle ground compromise between Dave Tepper and like I have a feeling that they wouldn't pick a head coach that they both didn't 100% love, right? Like there's like, I don't halfway love this. Like you have to, Dave Tepper, you have to love this guy. Dan Morgan, you have to love this guy. And so Dave Tepper, as we all know, wanted a young offensive coach, right? And Dan Morgan, this is my speculation, he's a defensive guy. He's a former linebacker. I tweeted a long time ago, like all his coaches were all defensive coaches. His success as an executive and as a player were all defensive head coaches. And so I figured that that's how he'd lean. So, hey, if you're going to get somebody, why don't you get somebody who's kind of like Pete Carroll, who's a young offensive coordinator who has some success in this league. Okay, we are 100% bought in on this guy. And so that's where I could see not necessarily Tepper stepping back, but like both. I mean, this had to have happened, right? Dave Tepper and Dan Morgan being in alignment. Like this is exactly what we both want versus like Dan Morgan loves this, but Dave Tepper doesn't want this. Like there has to be some sort of unified, especially with a third party involved, in which end up leading to the hiring of Dave Canales.
Yeah, and then I guess if Morgan loves defense, like maybe they keep Jerry Everone, even though he's taking a couple second interviews now, and maybe they give him a couple $1 million pay bump, something like that, to stick around. It'd be nice if they, I don't know, fired Dave Campen or Mike Campen, whatever his name is, to improve the offensive line. I don't know, but yeah, let's talk about the offense. He's definitely dynamic, you know, he's showing the field. But yeah, in terms of personnel, I wonder what this means, what this brings. And my fear was, you know, I hope. Because I wonder what the contract is too. Like, I wonder if they got him on the cheap because no one else wanted him. You know, hey, we're going to give you $6 million a year or $5 million a year for 5 years. I hope that they're also not going to cheap out on the player personnel. I hope they don't rely on his philosophies and his scheme to make what we have work. Like, I hope he didn't say that. You know what I mean? I hope they don't. Hey, can you work with Terrace Marshall and can you work with you know, all these guys, Jonathan Mingo, can you make these guys work? Can you make it work? You can make it work, right? You know what I mean?
You're the guy. You're the genius.
Yeah, I hope they didn't ask him to do that. I hope they don't expect that. And like that's my fear. Like obviously we know where they got to fix it, but I wonder. Does he? Well, I guess when you look at it, I'm just thinking about the two offenses now. They had DK Metcalf, Mike Evans, two big-bodied separators, contested catch guys, and then you had Tyler Lockett and Chris Godwin, who are the smaller, nimble guys. We don't have neither of those, and so you got to pick. Well, I guess Amir Marset was he's kind of that nimble guy who kind of flashed a little bit. But I wonder how it changes their wish list on personnel and who to bring in.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I noted when we're looking at different head coaching candidates, one reason I love Todd Monken as a possible head coach is because he adapts to everything. So like big wide receivers, small wide receivers, big running backs, small running backs, tall quarterbacks, small quarterbacks. He's made them all work no matter what. He's always said like, hey, whatever you give me, like I will maximize the person. Like I'm not going to focus on what they can't do. I'm going to maximize what they can do.
Right.
Dave Canales is only 1 year of offensive coordinating, and he's only had, I mean, he's been a quarterbacks coach. He's been, he's helped with the offense in Seattle, but it never had his own blueprint, right? And so the 1 year that we have, the small sample size that we have, where he was in charge, like you said, he had a Mike Evans, he had a Chris Godwin, he had a Rashad White, and so if he doesn't have that, like you said, like what happens? And so I hope they learned their lesson from last year with Bryce Young. It was like, oh, Bryce Young could uplift everybody, right? And so like, okay, we can't do this for Bryce Young. We can't do this for Dave Canales. We got to get like some infusion of awesome talent in here. There are some pieces. I mean, I know that he was a whipping boy, but like Jonathan Mingo, like really, I saw a trajectory at the end of the year. He got injured. He could play that slot role. I think one thing that stunted Mingo's growth is that he kind of excels in the slot, which is where Adam Thielen was featured. And so does Thielen move on? Does Mingo like ascend to that slot? And he could be the Chris Godwin in this offense, but they'll need that big X receiver if they want to copy a Mike Evans and a DK Lockett. There's some awesome ones in the draft. Keon Coleman from Florida State, A.D. Mitchell from Texas.
All could be available.
Yeah, Brian Thomas. They're all these big X receivers that are jacked. And
as long as they're not, when I think of especially Keon Coleman, Florida State, big guy, catch radius, I still think about Kelvin Benjamin. It freaks me out. Just he was trying out as a tight end last time I saw him. He just blew. So if you're big, I want you to be big and a freak like DK Metcalf. I want you to be fast and large and a freak. There's that guy Xavier Legette. I think he's only like 6'1", but like he's a beast. And he's an absolute beast. And so I would take somebody like that. Yeah, I was going into that. I was in this Mike Vrabel mode. I'm like, okay, we're gonna be hard nosed and we're gonna punch people in the mouth. Derrick Henry's gonna be a Panther and all this stuff. And then now it's like, we're gonna be flashy now. So that changes. I think that changes. But like you said, he works on the team's strengths, and so yeah, he's not. It doesn't seem like he's stuck in his own mold. That he's willing to be malleable and flexible. And let's see if it pans out on the field. I'm very interested to see.
And the good thing, and this is something that we might have touched on later on, but like, and you talked about it a little bit, is like who's coming on with him and staff. And the big hot rumor is Brad Idzik, who is the wide receivers coach in Tampa. He also coached with Dave Canales in Seattle. He was the only coach that came with him to Tampa Bay when he moved from Seattle to Tampa Bay. I tweeted an article from the Peter Report, and it was a whole article about how his own quote, Brad Idzik's own quote, is like, they're two peas in the pod. Dave Canales and Brad Idzik. And so it's very likely or very possible that he travels to Carolina with him and becomes the OC. But if there's anyone who could uplift these wide receivers, both Idzik and Dave Canales are wide receivers coaches, and they're very good teachers. And so if they can't make anything out of certain wide receivers, then you might as well pass and move on from the wide receivers, because you have two really good teachers that could possibly come on board.
Yeah, I'm interested to see now who gets hired in Atlanta now. If it's Mike Vrabel or someone who's more of a name, we already know people are going to be upset, but it is what it is. In a way, I'm not that. I don't know. I'm like at peace now because I'm just like, all right. I feel like next year is almost going to be like a tryout year for this guy. But at least he has all off. I guess they all have all off season. But it feels like next year is going to be a tryout year. But the thumbnail or the title of this one is Panthers taking a risk, because you're putting Bryce Young's career in this man's hands now. He's 42 years old, a young guy. He's going to grow up with Bryce Young. If this somehow fails, then it's stressful. Then you start looking at mock drafts and who's the quarterback in Texas for 2026. Like this is a big decision. Like it's not just like, oh, he's cheap or whatever, he's promised. Like they need to know, like, this guy is going to bring us to the playoffs at least and improve this quarterback that we put so much resources in. Because if this fails, I feel like it could start something bad that I don't even want to think about. Like, we're seeing, maybe this is what, Jared Goff started with Fisher, and then he got friggin' Buddy, and then that at least got to a Super Bowl, which they lost, which is fine. But hopefully this is something close, because I already forgot his name. What the hell's the LA Rams coach's name? What's his name?
Sean McVay.
Sean McVay. Yeah, when he came in, no one really knew who Sean McVay was.
Yep.
Who's this guy?
Yep.
He wasn't Ben Johnson. Definitely not Ben Johnson level height. And they turned it around, and then they found something better in Matt Stafford, and fine, that's cool. But I hope the turnaround for Bryce is the same as we saw in Jared Goff, because the last thing I want to see is Bryce just fail here because we didn't surround him with the best talent, coaching-wise and personnel-wise, and he ends up succeeding down the line for the Cowboys or something like that. Like, I don't want to see that. I think it's just, that'd be worse than Christian McCaffrey succeeding with the San Francisco 49ers. That would feel so bad. But yeah, well, Edgar, I appreciate you. What are you going to say? What were you going to say?
I was say, speaking of like your history lesson about Ron Rivera, at least the Panthers have a history. Like they started with a first-time head coach and a number one overall quarterback in Cam Newton, and they were able to ride that. So maybe, this is a stretch, but it's possible that they ride that wave again of a first-time head coach and a number one overall quarterback, and hopefully this marriage like blossoms. And I think one thing that we are easily forgetting, like I think I'm glad you brought it up, is like, hey, this whole franchise is sitting on this decision. I think if this fails, like you have to start all over again.
All over.
They might get the number one pick again. But I have a hunch that they are super, super confident in Dave Canales for two reasons. One, again, I think this is kind of it's Dan Morgan's friend, or Dan Morgan worked with him. I know there's this picture that Mike K brought up, like them broing out before the Tampa Bay game.
I know.
But the other thing is that like they committed to him like right now. And I think that's one thing that we're kind of missing is like, hey, if you were kind of like on the fence, if you weren't sure, let's wait until let's really see if Ben Johnson's really gone. Let's see Todd Monken. Let's see Mike McDonald. Let's see, we still haven't fully explored Mike Vrabel. Maybe there's other we haven't even second interviewed Bobby Slowick. Right. But they said like, hey, today, Thursday, before all of that, before we're not waiting until the championship games, we're going with Dave Canales. He's our guy. And so I feel like they must be especially, and then also, like you mentioned, no one else had Dave Canales on their interview list. So they could have waited till next week. They could have waited 2 weeks. It's not like Dave Canales he's not going anywhere else. Or if he says like, oh, I'm going back to Tampa Bay, it's like, go ahead. We have other options. So I think that shows me that they're really, 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 really confident in Dave Canales with like him having the franchise on his shoulders and taking it. And to be honest, by hiring him, there's more pressure on Dan Morgan there is on Dave Canales, because Dave Canales is young. Like you said, nobody knows who he is. I mean, we kind of know who he is, but like the general public doesn't know who he is. And so there's no expectations. No one's gonna say like, "Oh, Dave Canales, you don't get a championship next year. You suck." Like we don't like. He's just a guy. Dan Morgan, you were here. You've been here for 3 years. You hear this big name from Seattle, Buffalo. You're supposed to be not Scott Fitterer. So if you can't upgrade this roster, the blame is on him. It's not going to be on Dave Canales.
Yeah, as they say in soccer, you have to back the manager. You got to back him. You got him. You got him for what he's good at. Help him be good at what he's good at, and give him what he needs to succeed. You can't just put in, even if you put Bill Belichick's a mind, but if you have crap, like you can only do so much. And so
look at last year.
Exactly. And so they got to back him. They must have given him some promises. And, I don't know how these coaching things work, but I don't know if he brought a list of players like, hey, pay Mike Evans whatever he needs. I guess we can keep Brian Burns. Now I wonder about Brian Burns' future, just a little bit, just a bit, just to get that draft capital to build around this young guy. And I'm very interested to see about that. And I guess we also haven't heard about the other side of the GM hiring this Tillis gentleman from Kansas City. I don't know if he is coming. He's reportedly be a favorite. We'll see once he comes what happens with the contracts. But
it sounds like first of all, like Samir Suleiman, who was in charge of it in the front office, he mysteriously disappeared.
He's gone.
No press release, no nothing. He's like, oh, they've parted ways. Like, okay, no nothing, no thank you for your services. It was just like, he's gone. Okay, cool. And so there's a big gaping hole in the front office for someone to manage contracts, to be a lead negotiator. So Brant Tillis is a major name to look out for that all the insiders are talking about. I think Nick Mateo from the Ravens is also still in play. Yeah. I have a feeling that like maybe they're trying to like subvert the Rooney Rule, because since this is a new office or a new position, the interviewed minority, maybe there's still negotiations. I don't know, but if I think by now they would have already announced Brant Tillis, but something's going on. And whether they go with Tillis or they go with Mateo, that makes me feel a little bit better about the Dan Morgan hire, because they're coming, both Mateo and Tillis come from two franchises that have been super successful in drafting. Yeah. So Dan Morgan by himself, obviously we're like, I don't know, you sucked when you had Scott Fitterer, but you're going to pair him with someone who's been successful. Maybe Dan Morgan's like, oh, I wasn't thinking about that. Or like, let me get Dan Morgan's personal scouting experience with someone who knows more analytics, and both know analytics and both know scouting, but like the combination of two could probably, in their history of successful drafts in their previous franchises, maybe uplifts Dan Morgan or makes Dan Morgan's approach maybe a little bit more different. And so that gives me hope as well for drafting if they add a Brant Tillis or a Nick Mateo from the Ravens.
True that. All right. Well, I got to boogie, go to work. If you hear a ruckus at the Canales Church and they're celebrating and he's there, I expect you to beeline it with your camera and get an interview exclusive. And then
all right, I'll head to church.
Start your YouTube channel. All right, do what you got to do. I appreciate you jumping on. I know it's like 9 a.m. there. I appreciate you. I don't know if you're at work or at home, but you're great. You make us smarter always, Edgar. You're the best. And
you are too.
No, I'm not. I'm so dumb. I'm so dumb.
Okay, take it back.
Yeah, but I did predict fit young coach. We got it. You got
it. You got your guy.
All right. Okay. Talk to you later. Everyone follow you on Twitter @PanthersAnalyst, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Phil.